That's okay. That's fine with me. We're going to be doing it tomorrow for the wildfire community strengthening sessions statewide, so that's all good. Yeah, so real quick, we've been working on sort of a dashboard project for a number of months now. First of all, it's helpful to understand what a dashboard is. You've probably seen them around. They can look very, very different, but essentially a dashboard is a tool that uses geographic information systems, technology, to organize layers of information into visualizations. And that can use maps, public data, community surveys, a lot of different tools that are embedded in that sort of map. So the more accurate the map and data are, the more capably a dashboard can be used to reveal deeper insights into data, like patterns and relationships and situations. And that can go then to help multiple stakeholders make better planning decisions or other decisions. So what we wanted to do was create a dashboard that really grabbed a lot of different information from a lot of different places about the both impact of the fire, as well as sort of the rebuild and recovery as it's ongoing over time. So this project was started, by us, but it's since grown to include folks like Southern Oregon University. They're kind of housing it under their umbrella. And that includes the options for future research capacity within the students that are there. Essentially the environmental sciences program there. Our first intern Sabra here came through Local Innovation Works and was quickly brought on with funding from Rogue Workforce Partnership. So I want to give them a huge amount of props. Pacific Powers donated to this project, as well as Ford Family Foundation and Oregon Community Foundation. Some of the data that's presented here was gleaned from the help of everyone from Business Oregon to Oregon Housing Community Solutions, Community Services, and Department of Human Services as well. So Saber, if you could just screen share that very first match. And also Rich Nauman is here from Esri himself. And I just got to tell a quick story about Rich. Thank you so much for joining. It's been a while since we've seen you, but Rich was a talent resident, used to be. He's now a blogger for Esri, which is the very large company that makes a lot of GIS projects internationally. He lived in Talent, and he started following the dispatchers on the day of the fire and trying to map out where the burn scar sort of ended up being. So this is a map that he published online. We then wanted to find a way to delve deeper into the map as we were developing the idea of the Zone Captains program. So the next iteration were a few of us coming together and trying to draw out what we knew about sort of development type. So we had like open land and, urban growth boundaries and the greenway and that kind of thing. We just said, here's residential, here's business. And we kept going and refining this map and bringing it closer and closer into focus. Started identifying zones, naming them, trying to figure it out, and going ever further into, what's mobile home park, what's a retirement community, single family, business, areas, as well as agricultural areas. And so as we did that, we brought on people who could do that kind of thing. And the idea was we needed a visual representation of where the fire hit our community and the various neighborhood types that were impacted. So months of work have gone into making these two-dimensional maps into a living document that's now accurate down to the tax slot and able to store a lot of layers and data behind it. And we're hoping this can become a tool for our area to start telling the story of the ongoing recovery. So here's where the map is now. It's explorable. This is just the map. What we're going to show you soon is sort of the dashboard as it exists. And so we needed to be able to visualize the process of the disaster, the recovery and the rebuild, and also interact with it and learn different stories from different neighborhoods and figure out, how each neighborhood is recovering. We wanted to use it in a way that can help inform the storytelling that's involved with the recovery. How does the data change over time, and what does that mean for how these zones are recovering? We want it to be a tool that can assist organizations and agencies to identify resource or funding gaps and conduct research for grants, And so, essentially you can select areas on this map and look at the statistics for that area specifically. Or our hope is that we'll get to that place. And I'll tell you some of the obstacles to that after Saber is done with the presentation. And we also wanted to, as I said, we're presenting tomorrow sort of to other state recovery leaders because they're interested in that kind of thing. How can we create metrics for each area's recovery and visualize that and make it open source and transparent to the community itself? And how can this be a tool in future disasters? So just to say, this is sort of our proof of concept presentation. This is our first sort of stakeholder engagement around what this tool could be, what it is now, what it could be, and a place to land the data that's generated by the rebuild. A lot of the data that you're going to see here is sort of dummy data. We need to work on data sharing agreements with the jurisdictions and get over those hurdles. There is some nice openings happening there. So yeah, just please keep in mind, just come up with some questions as we look into this a little bit more and post them in the chat and we'll try to get to them afterwards. There's a lot of functionality that's not represented here. The storytelling parts of it, the community input aspect that we can do in each of these zones to get better pictures of the community's needs and desires and how they envision and become part of the recovery through surveying and whatnot. So please just give us your wish list when we're done, post your questions in the chat. So now I'm gonna turn over to Saber Kronk. She's awesome. She's been working with us for a while. And yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm going to start off by just explaining what you're looking at right now. This is our intro pop-up, and it's the first thing that folks will see as they are using our dashboard. And just give me a second, I'm moving this little Zoom bar. And so anyway, this intro pop-up kind of just has a summary of our project. It'll have like our project partners mentioned in this. It'll have like any data citations or caveats that we have. And importantly, it has the instructions on how to navigate and use our dashboard. So once the user is done like reading this, and they will click this box here to acknowledge that they have read through it, and then they click on this button to dump them into the dashboard. And then for folks that are like me and can't like thoroughly comprehend and memorize that information that was all in that text box, we have this side panel here that has all of that information again, so that it can be referenced throughout the use of the dashboard. And it also has this blue push pin symbol up in the top right that will be able, make it able to be directly embedded into the dashboard so that it never collapses and somebody can constantly be referencing it. We are going to collapse it for now though. And so I guess firstly now I want to talk about like all the windows that are surrounding the map. These windows are what we call widgets, and they are constantly in correspondence with the map and what you have selected through the map, or what zone you have selected through this Explore the Recovery Zones list. And with that being said, this is how you select. You'll go up to this top left cursor button on the top left of the map there, and then you'll hit it. And once it is highlighted blue and you see this black plus sign, you'll know that the selection function is being in use. And then you'll go to whatever area that you know you're interested in and hit it. And then it'll automatically pan and highlight to that area. And it'll also update all of these widgets. We're a little slow right now because we're on Zoom, but as you can see, all those widgets have moved in coordination with the selection that I just made. And important to note, whenever you want to revert all these widgets to talking to the whole data set again, you have to deselect what you have selected within the map. And you know you have something selected within the map when this number 3 is here, and that shows we have 3 items selected. And this box is here showing that we have some stuff selected. So then you'll hit this X and it'll unselect, and we'll just go ahead and hit this cursor button again so that we're not in the selection function anymore. And then you can just click and drag to pan wherever you want to be, and you'll see that gloved hand there to show you that you're able to do that. Up in the top right, we have a searching bar where you can search any place or specific address, and you can figure out what recovery zone that specific location is corresponding with. We have a legend here that you can refer to see what all our symbols are, which I'll talk more about those in a moment. And then there's this for those that are more technologically inclined. You can use this to look through all the layers that we have embedded within our map and to close or open any of the layers that may not already be present. For example, these like gray outline boundaries, those are the city limits, and you can choose to turn those off if you so wish. And in the bottom right here, finally, is our zoom in and zoom out boxes, which most people will probably be familiar with, but just to point that out. And now to talk about the second way that we can make all these widgets change and talk about these zones is if you already know what zone that you are interested in, you can use this interactive explore the recovery zones list, and you can hit that zone, and in the map, it will automatically pan and flash to that zone that you have selected, and it'll also update all those widgets, and it will bring this pop-up up that gives us information about the zone. It shows the name of that zone, the number corresponding to the zone, the development type, which is your different color coding categories, and that we also have a legend for at this top left corner of the dashboard as well for you to refer to. And then it has an aggregated number of the fire impacted properties that are within that zone. And we do this aggregation so that all the individual stakeholders that are within that zone can have their identities just completely protected. And then finally, we also have our zone captains program information here so that people can go to the zone captains website if they wish. And then again, to mention, just like the web map selection, you have to also select this again to revert all these widgets to go back to our full data set being shown. And then one thing to mention is all these widgets are actually showing building permit data so that we can highlight the rebuilding process of the fire affected properties. And now for this next thing, this is the list of housing projects. It's also interactive with the map. The housing projects are these black housing symbols that are within the scattered throughout the map. So if you know which project you are interested in, you could click that on here and it'll talk with the map. It'll highlight and pan to that project, and it'll give us a pop-up with some basic information. Important to note here is all these housing projects are real housing projects, but some of the locations are not completely accurate just because this is all based of our personal research. And now to talk about these widgets that are down below the map here, starting at the left. This bar chart here shows the building permits that have been applied for, but that are unresolved currently versus those building permits that have already been issued, just to show the difference in, the process and the speed of the process within each of the areas. And next, we have this percentage of properties that are in recovery. And this is defined as just all of the fire affected properties that also have a building permit that is issued for those properties. And next, right directly below the map here, these two widgets here are talking with Jackson County damage assessment data. And they're just showing you on the top here, the raw just number of fire affected properties that are within your selection. And then below it, that's just a bar chart that is showing that same thing. And then to the right, you see these kind of incomplete widgets that say % recovered and % recovery ongoing. This kind of gives an example of what we could show if we did have more access to building permit data across jurisdictions and across cities. And then up here on the top right is a building permits and application statistics stack. And what you're seeing here is just basic text showing how to navigate through the stack. Here we have the total number of permit applications that is within our whole data set. This is going to be the permit applications that are within the selection. This is the permits that have actually been issued out of all of the permit application as a percentage of what is selected through the map. And this is that same piece of data, but instead of being a percentage, just the plain number. And this bar chart is showing the number of applications that are within each application status. And these statuses are kind of based off of the real permitting system of the city of Talent. And then this bar chart, I mean, not bar chart, this pie chart here is just showing the residential versus commercial land use categories based on all of those permits. And with that, I think I'm going to pass it to Alec to talk about the business and impact widgets down here.
Hey everybody, my name is Alec. I came on as a second intern to help work on this dashboard project alongside Sabra. And this widget here in the bottom right corner is what we can refer to as the business widget. And this is informed by data that was collected in the first 2 months following the Alameda fire by Business Oregon. So they did a really good job just trying to assemble a list of all of the businesses that they can think of or find that fall within the Alameda fire scar that may have been impacted, and then taking it a step further and trying to follow up with those businesses to actually get a response to see were they affected, and if they were, how so. And as I mentioned, this is just research they were doing on top of what they were already doing for work. So great job on you guys for helping with that. So this first bar chart that we're looking at is split into 4 categories, and that is whether the business was destroyed but is planning to rebuild and currently operating in a temporary location, whether it was damaged by the fire but still currently open, if they are damaged but planning to open back up, or fourth, if they were destroyed and it's closed and now that business is not planning to come back into our community. And you can see in this bar chart, we've got a few different bars for each category, and that is to represent the 3 towns of Ashland, Phoenix, and Talent. Ashland, you can see, is just a light gray, and there's only a bar representing them on the far left. We also have Phoenix in darker blue and Talent in the lighter blue. And so this just helps for us to visualize the types of damage we saw from the fire and how that is stratified across the towns. Sabra. This next bar chart here is actually talking about the number of jobs lost post Alameda fire, and it's split up by business sector. So we have some examples like construction, retail, financial activities, other types of sectors, but this helps us to see not only how many positions we lost because of the fire, but which type of industries may have been hit the hardest as a result. Sabra. Thank you very much. So this is just sort of taking that job loss information and extrapolating a little further and looking at actual payroll loss, and that's annualized. So for each of these business sectors, not only how many positions are we potentially missing out on, but what is the actual impact when it comes to the numbers and the economics that that's going to have on our community. And this final piece here for the business widget, it's a re-representation of the first bar chart showing the categories of impact for the business, whether it was destroyed, damaged, etc. The only difference here is we decided to include all of the businesses that were on that list of being potentially affected by the Alameda fire, but that we haven't received, or that Business Oregon hadn't received a response from. So we know that they're potentially impacted, but we just don't know what their current status is. And as you can see, that is the very large piece of the pie chart, the 67% number. So that just helps to show how big a piece of the recovery story that we still don't have, and why it's so important to try to increase collaboration and figure out ways that we can partner to get more information to help tell the story of recovery. And I'll pass it back to Sabra.
Yeah, and just one thing before we pass this back to Tucker, I just wanted to show again just how these widgets move around and change with your selection. So I'm going to select something through the recovery zones list here. Again, it's going to pan and it's going to highlight and it's going to bring up that pop-up. And then as you can see, it's changed all of these widgets as well to the location that we have just selected. And then I'm also going to look up something through this just so you guys can see how our search bar works. So for example, let's say I want to know about where the Ray's food place is and which recovery zone it's associated with. So you look it up, this gray dot that is kind of uneventful, that's Ray's, and then this is going to be our closest recovery zone. And so that's how it works. And thank you guys very much for letting us share this with you. And Tucker?
Great job. That was awesome. Yeah, so obviously Alec and Sabra and Jamie and Dwayne and early on even Rich, they've all just done an incredible job, and I've just been kind of standing in awe for the last months as they put this together and trying to help guess as a as an organizational lead what people might want to see. But really the question has to go back to the community. I mean, our hopes for the future of this project is that it can become a tool to track recovery both at R3V, some of the larger questions, longer term questions, and inform things like the housing committee of the LTRG, and be able to track housing as it comes back online. It is important to understand that we don't consider this tech thing, we consider it very much integrated with the very sort of like messy community organizing project of the zone captains. Being able to delve down and create community generated data is kind of at the heart of where we want to take this, so that we base so much of our research or grant asks around census data, which is inherently not equitable. I mean, in an ideal world it would be, but we don't actually know what the percentage of Latino AX with any certainty was. We have our best guess, but if we're able to like wrap in community generated data, we might be able to get a better picture of how the recovery is going from an equity standpoint, from a certainly a permitting standpoint, et cetera. So that's important to remember. And then again, we want this to be a tool that other communities can replicate that have to go through this kind of disaster. We know that there's some people up in McKenzie who are interested in the GIS project. We want to tell them about the pitfalls that we had and the dead ends that we went down and some of the obstacles. And speaking of obstacles, it is important to mention that, again, you can't always look at the data and say this is accurate, because we don't necessarily have a window into some of the jurisdictional, any of the jurisdictionals necessarily permitting numbers. We know that that they're interested in showing this data, that they're interested in making this kind of thing public. And we would love to be able to get some support on approaching them. Currently that's happening through Jamie at SOU on having data sharing agreements with the jurisdictions. Understanding what we want to show has been an obstacle. And then also, funding is always a thing. It's worth mentioning that Sabra's Workforce Partnership internship ends Friday. So we're going to be doing our best to make sure she gets to keep doing this kind of awesome work. So we know there's a number of other GIS efforts around the state, around the area. We're in touch with them. Phoenix is creating a dashboard with RV-COG that shows permitting data. So we're willing to work on, that's probably in our first place we go for a data sharing agreement. We have some conditions on that we're showing it the same way they want it to be shown. Talent is working on a big ARC Urban project that includes community feedback, which is really, really cool. And we're trying to learn more about that to figure out how we can align and support. And then, there's all some capacity with SOU and the student research projects that could come out of the environmental sciences program there. That's something that RV-COG is very interested about too. So again, this is sort of the facilitation and the implementation of the Zone Captains program and how we visualize recovery from a lot of different lenses. So with that, I'm kind of done. I really appreciate your time. And if you have questions, or I can look in the chat, I'm happy to answer some of those things. But Stephen?
That's great, Tucker. Thank you. And congratulations to Sabra and Alec for all your good work. It's amazing. It's a great opportunity. And we have some great questions around it. First question from Kate Jackson is, how did you acquire the business information and how will that be updated? I imagine is another part of that question. And
well,
then go ahead.
I think it's important to mention that the business and the economic data was a really early, super admirable effort from the folks at Business Oregon with So Ready to Support. And what that business data shows us is not necessarily how it's going now, but the baseline 2 to 3 months after the recovery of what the impact looked like at the beginning. It's important to provide capacity to that kind of research to say, how is it going now? Which businesses have broken ground? Which are planning on coming back? So we have a baseline, an early baseline, but now we need to track what has happened in the last, 8-9 months. So that's an important thing to think about. But again, a lot of that stuff came through much cajoling. I think Marta, you on the call here? Maybe. think she's there. Well, anyway, maybe you just muted actually. You know, that I think Alex also was kind of integral in asking for that kind of data, but that's just the baseline. It's not, doesn't represent, you know, hyper accurate information currently.
And so it sounds like, to answer Bill's question, which is how often will the dashboard be updated? It sounds like there's a capacity question around having the labor to do that work. Is that right?
Yeah, I think the question is, I mean, I think that Sabra and Alec and others could build a really good spreadsheet that feeds this data, that feeds the dashboard pretty regularly, and allow even our data sharing agreement partners to update that data, and it would automatically go in. So I guess the answer is, how quickly are jurisdictions willing to take the time, for instance, to update their own data? We know that Jackson County has the Rogue Valley rebuilds, but I believe their last permitting infographic is from July. So it'd be lovely to see if we can provide some capacity in helping track that. City of Phoenix, I'm hoping, I forget what Nikki told us, how often they get it, but it's intermittent. But if we can provide capacity and a tool that has a lot of community support on what people want to see, we might be able to ask them to either update it more or provide capacity to update it ourselves more.
Mm-hmm. Great. Any other questions for Tucker and team?
This is Marta. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. I'm gonna pull over, I'm driving. I wanted to thank Tucker and his team for the understanding and the special consideration and sensibility towards privacy of all the information that our team gathered. And so thank you to Tucker and the dashboard team and this initial data gathering effort. The purpose behind it wasn't just, to get data. It was to assess the state of a business and potentially get some resources like fire dislocated worker information and a two-pager that couldn't have been possible in English and Spanish without Alex Campbell's leadership, that had some just information from FEMA to insurance to Business Oregon and the Facilities Grant programs, or rather loan programs and the Rotary Grant. And I want to thank OED that had 4 staff members helping with this outreach. Tammy, Joe, Fu, and I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody, Rogue Workforce Partnership for the backbone of the spreadsheet, and of course, Alex's leadership. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, there's been a lot of wonderful collaboration that's come out of just this initial thing. But again, this is the first time we're taking it. This isn't a public thing yet because we don't have the data to make it a public thing. We would be misleading in its current form. So we really are asking for support in trying to get the most accurate data possible so that it can go public. Right now, we have the map on our website that allows people to find their zone as part of the zone captain's enrollment thing. So that's where we are. But it is worth mentioning something that Marta said is, you're trying to figure out what resources people need. I think part of it is comparing and contrasting zones. If there's a zone that's coming back really strong, what is that zone doing right? If there's one that's coming back really slow, well, what help do they need to come back in a way that we can track sort of the race towards recovery in a way that might allow us to ask really good questions and identify some opportunities for places that are maybe lagging behind. And I think that ability to compare and contrast is one sort of like use case for this. And I would really just love to understand what questions there are around or ideas around other use cases that we might be able to support.
I think that question of use cases, Tucker, is one that's really critical. And you and I had it the other day. And if you could share, do you remember some of the use cases that we talked about? If you do, it'd be great to bring those up. I think, there's one question is around, information is power, right? And we don't want to enable disaster capitalism by putting out a whole bunch of data as well. So there's a really interesting set of questions around this whole idea.
Yeah, there are GIS projects around the state that are much more sort of sensitive in that area. I know there's a land use suitability dashboard that OSU has worked on with DLCD that you definitely don't want to get someone who's, development minded necessarily deep into that one, because it tells you a lot of statistics about future viability of land and disaster prone. And we don't do that. And I think it's just, so the third time I want to underline, we don't show individual data. We only show aggregate data for a neighborhood. And I think that will hopefully allow us to get the access to the data that we need to actually do this. And obviously we want to create data sharing agreements with other organizations who need this kind of thing, other agencies, et cetera. But, use cases are, there's research purposes, grant research purposes. It can help raise a lot of questions. Why is this zone recovering so well? Why is this zone still lagging behind? What, how quickly is Talent, Phoenix, Jackson County processing permit? Is the new community permitting, the Wildfire Resilience Permit Center at the county, is it really working? I think it will. Could it be something that might be able to lead to better discussions around how everyone can do that kind of thing? Maybe so. So anyway, there's a lot of different use cases, and I really look forward to doing more of these kinds of engagements and ferreting out what the questions and what the wish list of the people that get to see it are. I think there's another question there from Bill. I don't think it's dashboard related. Is there any promotion or incentives for building more accessible, visible housing? So I think it's a more open-ended question to you, Stephen. Anyway, thank you all. I'll leave it at that unless there's other things.
So that's great, Tucker. Thank you. And yeah, this question about the promotion and incentives, that's a whole other big question. If anybody has a response to that, I do not, but it certainly is an interesting and good question. Not only accessible, but also energy efficient, et cetera. Right? There are a lot of values that we have the opportunity to slip them in the rebuild here. But there's a lot of incentive to just get back to life also, right? So to, get things going again. So any comments on that at the end here about accessibility or other values being put into the rebuild? Okay, well, I think we are at the end of our time. We're very close here. I thank everyone. It's been a very, very interesting and useful meeting. We will post obviously the transcripts and the videos and all that sort of thing for future reference, and just really appreciate your attention and your commitment to the rebuild and to bringing your good ideas and good questions to this space. I think with that, we'll call it a day. Thank you so much. Really great to have time with you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.